Tom Shade at The Lively Tradition, and this is our part of our continuing series of conversations with the candidates for the UUA presidency. And today we're talking with Jeanne Pupke, who serves as the senior minister of the First Unitarian Universalist Church in Richmond, Virginia. And if you've been following the campaign at all, you have come to know her and hear her in different forums. So I'm delighted to have her here with me today. Hi, Jeanne. How are you?
Hi, Tom. It's good to be with you. Thanks for doing this.
Well, you're welcome. So I'm going to jump right in. I think I got about 5 or 6 questions. I want to jump right in. And the question, I think it's on everybody's mind these days, is how is Unitarian Universalism going to be changing and responding to this age of Trump, this period of time in which the social movement, which has opposed most of our values, has been empowered and feels strong. And quite a contrast from the last several years when we felt that the tide of history was flowing with us, and now we feel that the tide has turned against us. So my question is, just describe as you would what the end state that you're looking for. What would a Unitarian Universalist congregation be doing, and how would it be doing things differently if we were responding well to this historic situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me answer that in 2 parts. The first part being, I want to do a little analysis on what the situation is, the way
Sure.
I understand it, and then talk about where we could be on that. First of all, I want to name that if you are a person who has not been participating in a large institution, especially in an Eastern city, and you've noticed the things happening in your life, you might want to make a claim that it would be a good idea to make America great again, because it's not feeling great to you.
Mm-hmm.
The reason it's not is because you perhaps went to school in the 20th century and haven't quite kept up with the changes that have been a part of new learning and continued learning on the parts of people you might consider fairly elite. But the truth of the matter is also that a lot of people who supported Trump did have a keen eye for a particular economic analysis that is very true. And it's true for everybody, including the supposed elites of the institution. And that is that income inequality has been soaring. I mean, it's not been changing. It's been dramatically altered. And we've been asleep to this. The financialization of our environment has made the poor, the working class, and the middle class all struggle to make a living. So it may be interesting that millennials can have gig economy jobs, but do they have benefits?
Mm-hmm.
We struggle to see that the poor are paid just $15 an hour when the true inflation-adjusted minimum wage should be in the mid-20s. And then we charge them for healthcare, which is so fundamental these days to anyone having the freedom to really do good work and not be overly concerned. But the fact of the matter is that we're pretending there isn't this economic struggle where the powers that be are receiving 90% of the benefits. So I agree with Trump voters on that analysis. I just disagree on how it gets solved. And the last thing, of course, is that the Trump voters have welcomed among them people who have a white supremacist lens. That doesn't mean every Trump voter prioritizes that. But what's starting to happen now is people are starting to have a racial identity in which they name that white folks who've been in the dominant culture are now starting to be experiencing loss of power. And it's true. White folks have to experience a loss of power for there to be enough room in society for everyone to share power. How can we examine that question and try to open up the conversation on how multiculturalism really does and can enrich everyone? So if we do that, if we do that kind of an analysis, we should be careful that we not rush to only a political resistance. The political resistance only deals with part of it. There's race, there's class, there's education, there's money. And we need to have a robust analysis of what's happening. And I think not a political response, but rather a moral response that undergirds all of our different responses of economics, education, race, and also the questions of politics. How do we articulate the strength of the values we hold? The first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of each person, so that no one is left outside the basic dignities of human capacity. No one is without health care. No one is without opportunity. Right now, those things don't exist for too many people. How also do we engage the fifth principle? This emphasis on alternate facts and alternate realities and the denial of science is helpful in disenfranchising people in the ballot box. That's part of what happened to all the millions of people who stayed home and didn't vote. It was so unappealing, so off-putting. They decided not to participate because they lost faith in any political outcome that could meet their need. How do we re-enfranchise and believe in our own fifth principle as a way of working together to make the best possible society? And how do we think about the seventh principle, which is being denied, ignored, where industry is being set loose without accountability, where regulations are under threat? Those are moral questions we have an answer to beyond a political analysis. So we need to start articulating much more comprehensively and much more effectively from many voices what those truths are and insist on accountability for that. It's great to be resistors, but the fact of the matter is when you're resisting, you're working on someone else's agenda in response to someone else's undertakings. How do we put forward a proactive agenda that brings people to accountability? There's all kinds of technical things we could do. For example, I'd like to run a campaign to raise 100 UU candidates for public office in the next 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, get everybody focused. Every 10 congregations have to come up with one candidate for some public office and get the heck busy in the congregation supporting that.
Mm.
Every congregation should have a ready talking point approach to meeting the media. Everyone should be using Facebook and other media to put forward a great perspective on who they are and what they're doing. And we can see that when we do that, when we hang a banner, when we pass a resolution, when we show up in our t-shirts, we actually have influence that we wanted to abandon a little bit in the past. I want us to have that influence again. I want us to be disproportionately influential in the conversation in the public square.
I'm hearing a lot of the influence of William Barber in what you're saying. I think, you know, in terms of the proactive moral agenda, stepping to a higher level than political. I think I'm hearing that is. I think I saw somewhere that you had been attending some workshops with him, some trainings, etc. So
yeah, I've been a follower of some of his teaching for a long time. But you're also hearing Nell Painter and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You're hearing people who have a deep moral commitment to the issues at hand. I'm hopeful that you're hearing Miguel de la Torre, that you're hearing Walter Wink and others as well, because that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, great. I'll go look some of them up because I didn't hear them because I don't know them. But I'm also hearing a subtle shift of emphasis in a certain way that we should be, when you say we should be articulating, I'm basically translating that into what our ministers talk about on Sunday morning. That's where we articulate the most, and some of that is moving toward a more empathetic view of the Trump supporting population, talking about economics, talking about feelings of loss of power, naming white supremacy as a problem, but not an entirely disqualifying moral judgment. That that we're trying to work with people in that, and that our ministers probably need to become better versed in economic analysis.
Well, I'll say two things. One is that I'm not looking to work in any way with white supremacy.
Yes, right.
Okay. But I am looking to raise the question of white supremacy. That's one of the things we're doing here at First Unitarian Universalist. We're doing a very vibrant thing called Living the Pledge, where we're asking our members and members of other religious communities to engage themselves in examining their own white supremacy, their own racism, the internalized racism all of us have been swimming in and haven't always been able to name. The fact that we equate white cultural value with normative behavior. So that if someone speaks in a different way, views something differently, meets a different set of criteria, they must not be whole, good, and satisfactory, which leads to our not hiring people who are different from us, which leads to us not engaging in conversation with that. But in fact, we have to make a choice, I believe, a very clear choice to be willing, as people of the dominant paradigm, to clear out some of what we are used to having, that we're comfortable with, to make room to invite in new things, some of which may test our comfortability, but to do so with a theological perspective that says, this is a sacrifice I make for the covenant of the community I am in, for the good of the larger political group I'm a part of, for my local, state, nation issues, so that I create room for all of us to be empowered. That's a belief in the fifth principle that's really radical. Now, you mentioned that sermons are the way we do reach out to people, but I want to challenge us a little bit on that. Every video I do on Facebook for my congregation is a sermon too. Every letter I write at the front of some report that somebody wants is also a sermon. Every answer to a question I give, and boy, have I been asked a lot of questions. Every one is an opportunity to say what it is we believe. And I think that we're talking about what our leaders do as well. If we privilege the sermon too much in this day and age, we're muting the voices of lay leaders who are very powerful and very capable leaders. So how do we raise up the sermonic values in more of our participation across the board?
Good point. What do you think, in getting to this end state that you imagine of how our congregations are acting, what do you think the role of the UUA president is?
I think the role of the UUA president is to create the kind of coalition that loves its vision into being. In other words, there is a temptation for me to get up and point to the moon and say, this is where we're going, But the truth of the matter is, and I've done this in my professional life, in my ministerial life, you got to get people to come together to articulate those truths together. Because until everyone feels like they've been heard in the process, they're not in the process. The great man theory is done. And it can't be replaced with the great woman theory, or the great lesbian theory, in my case. It has to be replaced with the theory of we, the theology of we, the moral imperative of we. And so part of what we have to do is intensely have conversation. I can tell you that if I'm the person elected on Saturday night, on Monday morning, I'm going to be in deep conversation with partners like the board, leaders, people of color in our movement, major donors, these are the folks I have to go to right away to say, are you in on this conversation? And can we listen to one another? I think that's the biggest thing the president has to do, is give us an opportunity to recreate our own hope.
So,
Hope is missing.
so what I'm hearing is that you view the role of the UUA president as um, a conversation facilitator, convener, and yet in some way moving that consensus forward.
Yeah, I think you have to be the prophetic nudge.
The prophetic nudge, not too far ahead and moving the whole group.
You know, if you get, even if your personal analysis is far ahead and you get too far ahead, I know this as a preacher, if you preach ahead of the congregation too far, they can't follow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you preach the just noticeable difference between
Mm-hmm.
them and the next place where they can see their own growth,
Mm-hmm.
they will follow. Our people are amazing about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we find in our congregation, there was not very little. In fact, I would say almost arrogantly not a discussion on race 11 years ago. Now there is no place in this congregation where there's not a discussion on race. Not too long ago, there wasn't a conversation on sanctuary. There is a conversation on sanctuary now. Income inequality wasn't really on our horizon, and now it is. Because we've walked each other along the way on the path.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's been lay leaders leading, sometimes it's been me to have the privilege of leading, but always it's me trying to articulate the conversation going on. And I think that's how you make change, that's how you make growth. And we need growth, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more than anything, what will double our capacity to respond to the environment is to double our numbers. We're so small, so tiny. We've got to get out in front of this.
As you imagine, I think that you just answered the question in my next question, which was kind of what's your vision of your personal role? What is the role that you take in the process of change? The prophet, the prophetic nudge. I'll accept that as the answer.
Well, there's something more. I think you have to be the developer of people. You have to believe in people and tell them you believe in them and push them just a little bit to imagine in themselves what they haven't yet imagined.
About fundraising, let me just start with this. I watched the presidential forum that you held with the Black Lives of UU convening in New Orleans last week, and as I have observed you in these forums, you're often you play the role of the realist, the one who's going to tell the reality. That's the role you play, and you're also a little more. What I detected in that was some pessimism about whether or not you thought our congregations were going to be able to make the shifts they needed to make in order for us to become to move into the multicultural future, and that there was some I just heard pessimism in there, a little more, maybe a little less optimism, but
well, my assessment isn't unrelentingly optimistic, because I've been doing this work and I know it's hard. I know it's hard among people who've even pledged themselves to the work to maintain an honest perspective. I know it's hard as a person who's internalized the racist perspective of my society to even confront it in myself. It pops up, and it's hard to tame, hard to control my thoughts sometimes. Fortunately, I've gotten to the point where I think I can control my actions better. But here's the context. You and I are white folks, and you were looking in on a room in which it was unfair and it would be rude to be anything other than honest in my analysis.
Mm-hmm.
There were people in that room who I knew were the victim of racism in our congregations. I knew it. I had observed or participated in some fixing of it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to go to that room full of Black Unitarian Universalists and not tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to white ears, I think that's hard sometimes. So, for example, when I said at Black Lives, I'm not in an all-out rush to bring people of color into our congregations,
Mm-hmm.
simply because I think we have work to do first. Otherwise, there'll be too many difficult situations. I'm not saying that I'm not optimistic about change. I know change can happen. I just want the Unitarian Universalist Association to be more responsible for the agency of creating programs that allow for that change. It seems to me that the creation of our best anti-racist programs is not happening in the UUA. And in fact, we've defunded those programs in the UUA. That's the wrong place, the wrong direction. I appreciate all these programs, including the one in my own congregation, Living the Pledge. Google it, Living the Pledge, okay? We work very hard on this and we're giving this service to other congregations. But why is it that the Unitarian Universalist Association is not leading a more thoroughgoing analysis of anti-racism and building up the skills of multiculturalism? I don't have an answer to that right now. I'd like to have an answer to it on June 27th.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have felt I was more negative, but I was being honest in the assessment.
Like, the question I have is the difference between running for president and being president.
Yeah.
And the extent to which the brutally honest comment of a candidate doesn't work as the assessment of the president.
So,
because people across the country, both people of color and white people, expect honest optimism about our prospects as
I have honest
faith,
optimism.
as a faith movement. And so
Here's what I think we can't do, Tom.
mm-hmm.
I think that's part of the great man theory that, onward and upward forever, we must point always to the things that we're doing well and thrive on those and be sure that we have opportunity to go forward. Well, we've truncated a lot of opportunity in our society. Therefore, it feels to me as though my time is up, Tom. Or your time?
No, that was my phone. But they
Okay.
have gone away. We were.
But what I feel is that there has to be a realism in the assessment. Otherwise, we have Mary Poppins running the association.
Mm-hmm.
Don't vote for me if you want Mary Poppins running the association, okay? Because
Mm-hmm.
I am going to be, in case anyone hasn't detected this, I'm going to be very straightforward and honest, okay? I'm going to say what I'm thinking in the belief that that is the kindest and truest thing I can do. And I assume my analysis needs more analysis from other people to be robust, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So do I believe in our faith? Oh my God, I want everyone to come on fire with the faith. I'm annoyed that we are so underdeveloping our response to the environment based on our faith. We have a tremendous faith. But let's be honest, the rebuilding and the building up of our faith is no small task. We are just like we were on Beacon Hill, a beautiful building in need of a whole lot of maintenance that's been deferred.
Well, I agree there. What I detect out there is a lot of ambiguity about people's uh, people's commitment to our faith, the belief that it's useful.
Hmm.
Uh, the people who go, well, it's I mean, you see it in pledge levels, right? People who don't pledge their cable bill on a on a month, on a monthly basis. That you can tell that it's out there. That, I mean, once you get beyond, you know, those of us who are on fire for the faith, there's a lot of like, well, is it really worth that much? Is it really
Hmm.
doing that much? Is it? And for people who are have been excluded by it, is it worth fighting my way into that? What looks like a fairly narrow social club. And so there has to be this, I'm interested in how people balance the realism and the evangelical fervor of what we need to do. But I think you've spoken to that every already. What would I have a couple of things I go when I ask, what would you say to that wealthy donor who thinks we're getting too political?
Mm. I think sometimes we're reflexively political when we should have a more thoroughgoing analysis that includes economics, education, class, race, uh, immigrant status. I think we're just, you know, I would agree with that, because the political analysis dominates the airwaves. We
Hmm.
tend to get sucked into that and think we're the Democratic Party at prayer.
Not at prayer, come on.
And we're not.
Democratic Party at meditation.
Yeah, right. I'm quoting my mentor there. Um, Here's what I think we have to understand is that our values and our perspective on what the world can be is really a, a deep call to change the nature of humanity and society today. It really is. From self preoccupied, self generative individualism toward a wiser, collective perspective on what is best for the good of the whole. That's what our faith has tried to call us to over and over again. We've had to learn many different lessons over time. But I believe our plural perspective is the intuition that this society needs right now. Everybody in the circle, everyone included, everyone valued, and everyone having the opportunity to contribute. And within that, then, leaders emerge. The reality of our faith lived out is a radical proposition. It's as radical as starting a company. It's as radical as venture capital, which business people understand, large donors understand.
Hmm.
I can speak to that and talk about whether or not we can use the money that they have earned, and they rightly feel they have earned it, to make that dream come alive. It would be my job to shorten the distance between the things they deeply hope for out of our religion and the reality because of their contributions.
Hmm. Hmm. So there's an appeal to an entrepreneurial sense of transformation, that using their money, that you are offering them an opportunity to use their money to make a real social difference.
Well, I've been an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing that was always my greatest concern when we were figuring out the money, when money was tight, was that there were people who had come on board to stand with me in that business, who had mortgages and college tuitions and car
Mm-hmm.
payments. And my loyalty to them was to demonstrate that we were all in this together, whether I was happily paid or unpaid, but they were going to get paid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think for people with money, they want to see their dreams come true. They want to see the realities they're hoping for. And the fact of the matter is, we can help them with that, but we have to dream that with them.
Interesting. Good. Good. How about this person? What do you say to? I heard one of our colleagues at a small group in a convo decade ago, more than a decade ago, say, the UUA, they always want so much from us, all these things we're supposed to be doing. And the reality is that if I can get the orders of service printed and the doors open on Sunday morning and a halfway decent sermon, that's my week. That's what I got. I'm our little church, my little ministry not uh, is not served by the grandiosity of our ambition sometimes. What do you say to that minister? The one who's like feels they're up to their elbows in alligators and just trying to get the job, keep the doors open.
Yeah, I wouldn't deny that some ministers are up to their elbows in alligators. I also think some of them feel mightily alone and isolated. You know, there's no reason
Part of
why.
what was being said there, was I'm alone, and
I'm feeling real alone here.
yeah.
And I think both within the congregation and with their colleagues, they can do much more. I heard years ago for the first time when I was a seminarian about ministers getting together in August to plan out their sermons in detail and to sort of charge one another and excite one another about topics and possibilities and to collaborate on that. And since that time, we've had many of those iterations. We've also had thematics, soul works, and these other things that have just soul matters that have, collaborated more and more and more. It should be getting somewhat easy unless the congregation is the battlefield. And when the congregation is a battlefield, when there are fake fights, as Nancy Ladd pointed out to us at GA, then it feels like that's all you can do. So how do we all become aligned in the idea that there's joy in this work? How do we have the support of one another? How do we pull together in a way that helps us know that we're supported and sustained? That's really our religious work. And it is our work with our colleagues too. I understand that were we to sit in Boston and pontificate, it's not particularly helpful. I know that because I've been that minister, right? But I also can say that there are some things that are missing that I really need. There are some things I'd like to see happen, including attention to small congregations, which sometimes it seems like we've just written them off. How can we stop and reverse that? How can we reverence their ministry? How can we enhance the work they're doing? How can we support the ministers better? And one thing that's really important, I think, is to say we've got to do more fundraising because we can't keep rattling our tin cup and saying, this is what you need to do first.
Here's my last question. We've all learned how to do theology from our social location. We all have learned to premise our opinions with some acknowledgement of who we are in the world, how our privilege may affect our perspective. But I want to flip that question on its head. What is it that comes out of your background, your life, your experience, your social location that motivates your best work around social justice? Who are you when you're at your best in this endeavor? From where are you speaking?
I am speaking from a deep belief that there has been profound injustice, and I am courageous enough not to care what speaking the truth will ask of me. When I'm at my best, I will risk it all. I will say the things that are hard to hear, and I hope I will say them in a way that recognizes that it's hard to hear, because that's important too. But the call to the prophetic nature of justice work is not to back down in matters of convenience or security, When I'm at my best, my congregation has my back. We are moving forward and we are afraid together, but we will not let our fears stop us. That's happened to me a privileged few times that I really love. Sometimes it happens in a sermon, sometimes it happens in the public square, but by golly, I'm empowered not because of my brilliance, but because of the community that I am situated in, and that is my church that I serve, my people that I love, my faith that I believe in.
What I hear is a fearlessness, or let's say a willingness to face fear. Where and how did you come to that?
When I was a kid, I saw on TV the young people in Birmingham, the young people in Selma. I saw them. I didn't know at the time, I didn't have the information to know that the young people in Selma were marching because their teachers were leading.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another place that I drew from, which is that when I was a child in the Catholic Church, I read about the saints and their relative fearlessness to stand up for what they felt was their true belief. Now, I don't agree with that theology, but I understood how much one human being is obliged to stand up for other human beings. And where injustice is present, there is a blessing to be given, even if there's sacrifice, even if there's suffering. I'm not afraid of the theological term suffering and sacrifice. I'm the oldest of 7. That's just part of it, you know? And if I leave this association, if that's what the delegates decide, I am going to feel like they have my back, and I'm going forward with them. And we're going to work to see a new world because we need one badly.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's a bit of a revelation. So oftentimes people talk about what they believe here, but not. I'm always interested in what is it that brought them to that. What's the life experience that brought them to that? What's the cultural environment that brought them to that? To those beliefs and those actions. And I think you've explained some of that about yourself. So thank you very much, Jeanne. I think that'll do it for this. I just had one other question. Has anybody in your campaign been in touch with Russian intelligence? Can you give us that assurance?
We have been in touch with Russian intelligence, and we're arranging those chess games for later in the season.
Wonderful. It's just another cross-cultural opportunity. Well, thank you very much, Jeanne. And our second interview with Susan Frederick Gray, I have that scheduled for a couple weeks from now, actually a week and a half or so from now. And then after that, all 3 of these interviews, including the one with Allison that I did a week ago, will be on YouTube, and you can reach them through my blog and through other social media channels. Thanks very much, Reverend Jeanne Pupke.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Sure thing. Thank you.